Meine Damen und Herren, wir steigen in den Nachmittag ein. Ich darf um Ihre Aufmerksamkeit bitten. Mein Name ist Uwe Häuser und ich habe die Ehre, das Panel des heutigen frühen Nachmittags einzuführen und zu leiten. I have the honor to moderate this first panel of the afternoon, and so if everybody please starts to look this way, we're gonna get into this afternoon with this very prominent podium under the title "Which Way Forward? Reflections on Global Turmoil and the Role of Markets, Governments and Civil Society." It's sort of an introductory panel into the crisis with 5 very renowned panelists, which I take a moment to introduce. Right to my right, to your left, is Joschka Fischer, known by everyone in the room, anti-establishment rebel, Green politician, foreign minister and vice chancellor of Germany, professor in Princeton, entrepreneur at Joschka Fischer and Company, and known to always think out of the box and never within the box. Next to him is William Janeway. He also, by the way, is a graduate of Princeton, and you're going to see that somehow Princeton is his theme in this panel. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. He's a PhD in economics from Cambridge University, senior advisor at Warburg Pincus, and so much more. He's involved with Roubini Global Economics, O'Reilly Media, and other organizations, as well as various research institutions, including INET. And I think when you look at his vita, you have to say he never stuck in one box in his whole life. Next to him is Dennis Snower, who studied at Oxford and then was a PhD in economics at Princeton. He consultant to the IMF, to the World Bank, to the OECD, to the UN, and to everybody else who has something to say in this world. Well-known labor economist, of course, and public policy expert, and president of the Kiel Institute of the World Economy. He is widely connected in an amazing network as professor and as manager of the Kiel think tank. And I think you can say that he always widens the boxes he chooses to be in. Next to him is Josef Vogel. He is a constant visiting professor, yes, to Princeton. I don't know who put this panel together, but they did an amazing job. He is a very famous book author in Germany and beyond Germany, and most of all, professor for German literature, cultural and media studies here in Berlin. And when you read him, and when you read what has been written about him, you find out he never fit in one box, and thus is very apt for this panel and the subject of new economic thinking. Last but not least is William White, longtime thinker and strategist at the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, and before that a leading mind at the Bank of Canada. Now he chairs the Economic Development and Review Committee at the OECD in Paris. And judging from an interview with my own newspaper, Die Zeit, quite some time ago, and actually quite some time before 2008, I know that he knows how to think out of the box. By the way, I Googled and Googled this morning. I didn't find any Princeton relationship. Is it? No. Okay, so he is the exception to our Princeton rule. It's quite a subject. It's quite a start into our subject. We have to determine a little bit more what this crisis really is about. Is it a crisis of financial markets, of governments, of central banks? How do these speakers view the crisis we're in? And what ways do they see out? Both with regard to thinking and then with regard to policy recommendations. Let's start with the statements of these gentlemen. They have all been given 20 minutes. Since it's so late, I'm asked to ask them to be a little shorter than you set out to be. Then we're going to have a quick discussion between the panelists afterwards. Let me start with Joschka Fischer, ask him to give us his remarks, please.
Well, thank you very much. Before addressing directly the crisis, let me start with a little bit of history. We're meeting here in a place, beautiful place, which was for decades part of the military border on the East German side. You couldn't enter this place. You would have been shot at the spot. As a child of the Cold War, I was used to that. This was a firm world order which defined these very localities here at the Brandenburg Gate. And this has changed. This has changed profoundly, dramatically, in a very positive way. So welcome to the place where everything started. In November 9th, 1989, when the wall came down, I think nobody in my country could really ever imagine that it will happen, and it happened. A whole world order, which began in the summer of 1914, collapsed at the end. The Soviet Union disappeared. And since then, we are in a period of transition. But even earlier, at the end of the 70s, a statesman in China started also a huge transformation. Deng Xiaoping with his 4 modernizations, which accelerated in the very historical moment in the beginning of the 90s with the events I just described, and gave globalization a dramatic push. And what we see nowadays is that we understand that globalization is not a conspiracy. Globalization means, based on new technologies, especially new communication technologies, that the overall majority, especially in Asia, of mankind is trying to reach the same level, the same living standard. We are used to it since decades in the West and Japan and some tiger states. I think this is a dramatic revolution, maybe the biggest revolution since the Industrial Revolution, or even bigger than the Industrial Revolution, because a growing mankind is striving now to reach the same level of consumption, of social stability, of individual freedom, as we are used to it in the West since decades. This will transform our world. And I think if we look to the basic trends of the 21st century, I think this is the basic trend. This will change the world dramatically and completely, and this will have consequences. As I said before, we are in a period of transition. We know where it started, but we don't know where it will end. But we have some benchmarks even today, I think we can define. And it's not the financial crisis. The real benchmark we can define nowadays is this transitional power of the emerging markets, that the majority of mankind want to have our living standard. And this will transform the economy, this will transform the international political system, but this will also transform, I think, the global environment and the regional environments, and will have a dramatic impact, including the global climate. From my point of view, this is very important when we address the present crisis. I'm not an economist, therefore we will have, I think, a deeper insight from the experts here on the podium. But for me, it's obvious it started as a financial crisis. Nowadays, it's not only a financial crisis, it's also a political crisis. But for me, the basic question will be whether we can address these basic trends. Low carbon economy is the future. Whether we will be ready to address that issue, it's a question to us. China, from my point of view, has no alternative than to transform itself to a low-carbon economy. Otherwise, they will crash the wall within the living generation. They don't have the time to preserve their growth model beyond the living generation if they continue in the way as they are doing it. And I think this is a tremendous opportunity. We shouldn't see that as a threat. We should see that and address that as an opportunity. So what I don't understand, when we are talking about the need of growth, we can see a huge opportunity in transforming the global economy and our national economies, the leading economies, into low-carbon or non-carbon economies. We are talking about growth. Everybody is talking about the costs, but there is no growth without costs. There are not profits before costs exist before. So from my point of view, this is the real transformation we have to address. Secondly, this will have also tremendous political consequences. I don't believe that the balance of power, we are used to it now for 300 to 400 centuries in the international political system, can really produce positive results in the 21st century, given the interconnectivity and the size of mankind. I was born 64 years ago, 2.5 billion people, 7 billion people nowadays. When my grandchildren will be in my age, it will be 9 billion people. So does everybody here in the room believe that we can manage our relations, the relations of 9 million people, round about 200 states, based on the principles which were developed in Europe after the 30 Years' War? I don't believe in that. We are interconnected in a way as it never happened before. So cooperation will be much more important for the future than in the past. And therefore, I think the question whether we can really, on a cooperative platform, given the interests will not disappear, also the conflicts of interest will not disappear, but whether we are ready to cooperate or not is the key factor, not only for addressing the basic trend, the threat for the global environmental system by growing mankind and growing needs and wishes of this growing mankind, but also for the political system. So this is my second thesis. Thirdly, we have a specific European problem. In Europe, the financial crisis is a political crisis. In economic terms, are we in a more challenging situation than the United States or Japan or others? I suppose no. But what we don't have in Europe is the firm political framework. Our management of power is a serious problem. So what we see in Europe nowadays, and George is writing a lot about developments, especially in the perspective of the threats for the European Union, which I appreciate and share a lot of the position of George Soros. But on the other side, if we analyze from the beginning of the crisis in 2009 in Europe to the present days, we see also a dramatic change in the mindset. We are not over the Rubicon. It's still a very threatening situation. But when I think back, for example, to the mindset of the Chancellor at the beginning of the crisis in 2009 and the majority of the German decision makers, and compare that to the present situation, no to European approach, no to an economic governance in Europe, no, no, no. It was always no. And I look to the present situation, then we can see also not only a shift of the mindset, but a transformation of the European Union. Let me repeat, we didn't solve the crisis now. It's still very threatening. But we moved, I think, an important step forward. So, looking from the outside, what I see is a transformation of the especially of the European Union, of the currency union. The currency union is the avant-garde of the European Union. If the currency union will fall apart, the whole project of Europe will fall apart. I think it's completely nonsense to believe that Europe will survive, the common market will survive without the currency union. It's wishful thinking, especially in the UK, but it's wishful thinking. At the moment when the currency union will collapse, then the renationalization will start, and in a dramatic way. We will see wars in Europe, maybe I would exclude the Balkans, but this is not a strategic threat for the continent. But what we will see is a renationalization, and Europe will not play any longer an important role in the 21st century. This will be an extremely high price, and this high price pushes Europe ahead. Otherwise, we would have seen the collapse of the currency union. I think the leaders of the currency union understand perfectly well the price which had to be paid for the collapse of the currency union. Will be Germany ready, or is Germany ready to lead? My answer is unfortunately not. If you have the impression that Germany does not want moving into that direction because it's too costly, I don't believe that this is the real issue. The real issue is that Germany does not understand how to lead. And this creates a real problem for solving the crisis. I think the German people could be convinced to be the deep pocket of the European Union. And I'm not telling you that to please you. This is based on my lifelong political experience. I have a lot of talks, especially with conservative, business-friendly audiences, and there is a lot of shouting at the beginning, and we will never pay for the Greeks, and whatever, and they should work harder, and so on, you know, all this stuff. But at the end, it ends always in the same way. You seriously think that we must pay for that, otherwise we will lose Europe? Yes. Well, maybe you are right, then we have to do it. So that's my impression about Germany. I'm only speaking about Germany. I'm not speaking about France, Italy, or whatever. I'm speaking about my own country because I know it. So it's not a lack of readiness to engage and to lead. It's just we don't know how to lead. And that's a matter of fact which shouldn't be underestimated. It will depend also on the elections in France. I think this will play an important role, what will be the outcome. If a new president will come in, I think we will need some months or maybe a year to adjust to reality, and a new couple will be in the driver's seat. But don't forget, neither Schröder nor Chirac, nor Merkel or Sarkozy was a real love affair at the beginning, but Chancellor and French President are in fixed positions. They have to act in a certain direction because there is no alternative to that without disaster. So I'm pretty optimistic at the end that this will continue. So what we will see is that Europe will move into a political union. We have now de facto the fundamentals for economic governance created. This was an anathema, a no, a few months ago. But nowadays it's accepted that we are moving in that direction. Addressing the economic crisis, the financial crisis in Europe is not any longer a national issue. It's been dealt on the European level. The heads of states and government of the Eurogroup are de facto acting as a European government. the national parliaments are acting together, not in a common framework, but they are de facto acting as the caretakers of sovereignty, of budgetarian sovereignty. They are acting also on the European level. So what we can see is the emerging of a certain structure, which is a federalist one, but not in the framework of the traditional federalist ideas. It's a certain combination of an intergovernmental federalism, what we see emerge driven by reality. Now, this can fail. Do not misinterpret my words. This can fail. But on the other side, if it will be successful, at the end of the crisis, you will see a very different European Union. It won't be any longer the confederation called European Union, at least in the core group. And I suppose that the majority of the member states will follow that direction. At least in the core group of the Eurogroup, you will see the move into a political union, into a federation, not any longer a confederation. This is a positive option. Well, you will ask me what the Europeans will do. There will be a lot of shouting, maybe with two wheels over the abyss. European car won't look nice any longer. But the experience is whenever our leaders look into the abyss, they turned around the wheel and moved in the right direction. So let me sum up that. I think Europe is in a decisive moment, in a moment of whether everything can fall apart or we will move ahead into political integration. That's a prize for fixing the financial crisis, because I think that's in Europe a political and less an economic issue. We have to address all the other elements of this crisis, the imbalances between North and South, whatever. But welcome in Berlin. This is our capital. But this is also the capital of welfare, because this is a very poor city. If you compare this city or the surroundings of this city with the south of Germany or the southwest where I was born, I mean, in economic terms, this is not a perfect union. But politically, we belong together, and therefore economically too. And from my point of view, this will also happen for Europe. The differences between North and South are big inside Germany. They are bigger in Europe. But I think this could be overcome. So that's the question for the future, for the Europeans, whether we will play a role in the 21st century, yes or no. Allow me to say I'm optimistic that at the end we will make it. Whether optimism will define the future or not, I don't know. But based on the present experiences, I'm pretty optimistic that we are moving in the right direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joschka Fischer.